Good evening. Thank you, Leaf and the organizers, for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I would like to warn you that I'm going to talk about a topic that can be distressing, and I'm going to show you some images that are pretty unappetizing. Hope you're mentally prepared. Okay, let's get started. I feel guilty. Every day, I feel guilty about waste. It is everywhere. Personally, I create so much of it. Every day I go to work and order lunch, and every day it comes in a ridiculously wasteful plastic bag. When I ride on the airplane, I wake up to this meal, and I can tell I'm not alone in my guilt. Our lives are full of graphic symbols and inaccurate labels to make us feel less guilty. We pat ourselves on the back to just get the waste in the bin. But where does it really go? I needed to find out. In 2018, my company and I began to work on the problem of waste. We are a landscape and architecture studio called Ballistic Architecture Machine, or BAM. We are architects, landscape architects, artists, designers, and we try to be good business people. Our studios are in Beijing, Shanghai, and New York. For the last 15 years, we have designed parks and pathways, plazas, play courts, waterscapes, neighborhood parks, amphitheaters, landforms, slides, playgrounds and canopies, facades, tea houses, waterways, parterres, gardens, and allées. Why should landscape architects deal with waste? It's a good question. Why is it even remotely our responsibility? To answer it, I want to go back to Frederick Law Olmsted, also known as the father of American landscape architecture. I want to look at a project we all know, Central Park. What you may not know is that the existence of Central Park and Olmsted's design justification is a direct offshoot of the sanitary movement. The sanitary movement was a public health approach that developed in England in the 1840s to promote health and cleanliness. Its agenda included building sewage systems, paving streets, providing clean water, and collecting garbage. This is a quote from Olmsted's writing in his book called The Highest Value of a Park. Parks are now as much a part of the sanitary apparatus of a large town as aqueducts and sewers. Their management should be as much a matter of sanitary economy and as rigidly subject to sanitary tests. As the United States' first great urban park, Central Park was conceived as the lungs of the city and built in 1858 as an oasis for the sanitary advantage of breathing. We associate the natural image of the park with our job of landscape architecture. But we should not forget Central Park's raison d'etre, solving humble problems of urban sanitation. So, Central Park, and even the foundation of landscape architecture as a profession in the United States, was born out of the sanitary movement. What of our purpose? For landscape architects, I question if nature has become an end in itself. Have naturalism and design with nature distracted us? We have to admit there is a contradiction here. Our naturalism requires manuals, learned gardeners, continual maintenance. If naturalism takes so much work to get right, are we pursuing the right idea of nature? This is a quote from a thinker called Timothy Morton. The concept of nature has obviously not served us well. If it had, we wouldn't be here. Here, meaning planet Earth, at this moment, the moment of global warming. If so, called nature and its balance and wisdom had been something that really functioned well as an idea, there would have been no way we would have burned all those fossil fuels and endangered all life on Earth. When we say we love nature, we mean idealized wilderness. We take out the asteroids and earthquakes. This selective editing is a problem. When we say we can achieve ecological balance through the wisdom of nature, we are also avoiding the dirty, violent, and disturbing parts. Ecological balance is a myth, and it has frustrating implications. Almost everything we do as modern people living in cities is essentially counter nature, and thus, many of us feel guilty. Waste is perhaps the guiltiest part of the balance myth. In the idealized nature, waste and decay can become a layer for renewal. It becomes a beautiful cycle. But when waste is unnatural, it cannot be accounted for in an ecological balance. We are collectively avoiding the problem of waste to the point where we don't see it as part of nature any longer. We avoid the problem of waste, but frustratingly, the waste stays with us. We have rays of hope like compostable plastics or plastic-eating bacteria, but these are suspiciously funded and supported by the corporations that wish to make us feel more comfortable consuming. The hard truth is that waste production is accelerating, and there is no ecological balance that accounts for this. We must meet industrial consumption with industrial-scale waste solutions to achieve any form of stasis. To conclude my rambling introduction, I want to point out that trash is considered by world's governments as a renewable resource. That's right, trash, an unending stream of materials and energy that we extract from the Earth's crust, is a renewable resource. Now I'm going to take you through 3 trash projects in which BAM and I have tried to take on some aspects of the waste problem. This is the first project. It's called Baoshan Waste-to-Energy Plant. Our first opportunity to work on a waste project came in the form of a waste-to-energy plant called, or what we call a WTE. WTE definitely has flaws. It is not an ideal solution, but this is a topic for another talk. Simply put, waste-to-energy works by burning the trash and using the heat to spin turbines which create electricity and transfer the heat into municipal heating infrastructure. We found a client who offered to have us design the facade of a new WTE for a competition. Although we saw these as urban landscape design problems, the client gave us a facade project. We said, okay, we'll give you a facade. So on the left you can see the preliminary input, and the right you can see the site. So, of course, we started with Central Park. We came back and said, this building does not look like a trash plant. It's going to need to be a park. We will reuse industrial structures on the site and add the new plant under the park. And we won the competition. After we started working on the park concept, we added an educational component. We wanted the people of Shanghai to come to this building to see what happens after they toss their garbage. We started to envision a mini-city of programs, a museum of waste. We want school buses with loads of children from all over Shanghai to visit this site. So we organized the typical plant architecture to integrate 3 exhibition halls, and a long glass hallway where guests can walk the length of the plant and observe the entire process. Our Museum of Waste starts, as all good natural history museums do, with dinosaurs. The compression of heat and organic materials creates fossil fuels, which we begin to extract and exploit not very long ago, which today we are continuing to extract and exploit at accelerating rates and produce more petroleum products than ever before. We are moving towards the future which may or may not resolve our tenuous relationship with our biosphere. From here, the guests enter a long section of the plant and witness the trash arriving and the waste-to-energy process firsthand. And this is what it actually looks like. The plant has been operational since June 2023, and the plant is still being built, although parts of the project are still being built into 2024. This is where you see 150 trucks each day driving in to drop off the waste. This is overlooking the control room where the engineers monitor the plant. And this is back at the entrance of Exhibition Hall number 1. And this is a view of the protruding exhibition hall volumes connected by elevator and catwalk. To understand how the plant works, let's look at the master plan first. The park idea is overlaid over 2 plots. They're both 35 hectares, and the north plot contains the WTE. The roof has a long span area over the bunker and incinerators, which must be lightweight. But much of the roof was designed to hold up to 1.6 meters of soil. You can also see large voids, which meet fire and ventilation requirements for the plant below. Under the roof, you will see the workings of the plant, but it's a bit hard to understand and plan. We will talk about this a bit in a section later. But first, here are some of the zones below the plant roof structure. These areas are for the collection of ash and liquids. The left image shows the late stage filtration before it's exhausted, and the right shows the chillers, and through the skylight you can see the chimney above. So in this section diagram we can explain how the plant works a little bit better. The trucks arrive from the left, where they tip the trash into a bunker. It's picked up by a gantry crane and mixes the trash and lifts the waste into the incinerator. The waste burns at about 1100 degrees Celsius, and the heat is transferred in turbines. Exhaust is filtered through many stages before it's ejected into the atmosphere. We designed the facades of the project from the geological forms and patterns of the mountain. We like landscapes. The guest-oriented programs protrude through the facade connected by a catwalk. Much of the facade is designed as a porous mesh or perforations to allow for the correct amounts of airflow to reach all the right parts of the plant. Here you can see the transition of the facade materials and their transparency. The base is made up of a graphic pattern derived from mountain ranges, and it's rendered in cast concrete panels. The middle sections and operable sections are made up of metal mesh of varying opacities. The top section is perforated aluminum panels simulating a snow-capped peak, and the chimney itself takes on the shape and coloration of a snowy mountain spire. BAM did a great deal of study to design the roof structure to withstand loads suitable for large canopy trees. Here we are in the studio studying a model, coordinating the functional openings with the design of the roof. We were able to work with engineers at Arup to come up with a frame solution and decks that met the many requirements of the plant below, to be able to design the top landscape layer. The landscape is being installed as the project nears completion in 2024. The Baoshan Waste-to-Energy project was born from the concept of creating a recreational park as opposed to a waste plant. Ultimately, the project aims to attract future generations to this site so they can smell, touch, and see the role that waste plays in our planet's natural history. The next project I'm going to speak about is called a circular economy park. Thinking seriously about ecological balance, we learned a lot from Baoshan. Putting a WTE on the outskirts of the city is just not as good as getting it closer to the source. For Baoshan at optimum capacity, 150 truckloads arrive every day. Trucking the garbage is dirty and wasteful, and the transmission of power back to the city center is inefficient. In addition to the CO2 and energy loss, we break the cycle of the source of the trash and its recovery. We began to seek problems where we could position the WTE closer to the source. The benefits are huge. We found another operator trying to create a WTE for another site which is located within the fifth ring of Beijing. While this is not downtown, it is a central point of millions of residents, a good start to centralizing at a source. The site is an urban anomaly, a tiny infrastructural pocket of air, like a bubble in the system created by the curvatures of railways. In the urban plan, it could be considered a waste site, perfect for waste itself. For us, this was very interesting because the site had already been built with inefficient and undersized waste processing programs. The WTE could greatly improve the efficiency and the cleanliness. Plus, the waste heat from the turbines could be used to plug directly into the municipal heating system. We knew camouflage would be key, so we said, let's make this WTE fit into the surrounding railway context. Let's make it into a train hall. Our design of the plant utilized long-span structures of railway halls to create a plant which from the outside may appear as a museum or a railway center. The exhibition and guest programs are brick, like some of Beijing's best museums. And viewed from the surrounding roads and rails, the roofs appear as long train sheds. Now, the best part, the landscape. We designed the WTE architecture to plug into a new axis we carved through the plot. A small campus of offices connects to the axis. These are intended to be leased to innovative companies focused on solving the problem of waste. Floating Exhibition Center gives resident businesses a common show space and meeting point, and the axis terminates in a sports park built over the former landfill site. We bring in the groundscape and the middle layers to reinforce the spatial design, and finally the canopy layer of the trees. And we arrive at a trash supercenter. Here, trash is a resource sorted for reuse, recycling, and energy extraction. Office and workshop spaces are created to foster creative companies working on waste problems. And then the whole thing stopped. We literally ran into protests. Nearby residents had learned about the project, and they were very concerned about the proximity of the waste to their homes, and for valid reasons. In this case, people were actually brave enough to protest the project. At this point, it was not really possible to communicate why the WTE is actually better than the current outdated waste management happening at the site. People hated the idea of this in their backyard. We had reached the point that locating the WTE in the city center is not only a technical problem, but also a messaging problem. And this is why design needs to play a role in the waste problem. Sanitation engineers are not trained to deliver compelling messaging, as designers are. When people protested locating a WTE within the fifth ring of Beijing, we said, okay, you don't like it there. Fine. We're going to try to put it in the center of the central business district then. This brings us to our third project, which is entirely theoretical, a waste-to-energy skyscraper. We need to stop thinking about waste as something to ship off to a landfill. We need to push the waste back into the architectural density from which it originates. We found some academic work on this topic where the waste-to-energy components are configured for stacking, and we got to work. Based on our understanding of the China code and requirements, we worked with an engineering intern from MIT to stack a WTE, and we developed a stacked three-line plant prototype. We picked a site in an existing coal-fired power plant, which is decommissioned. The site is located within the two most populated zones of the district. But more importantly, the site has been designed as the future of the central business district, home to gleaming skyscrapers. So we took our stacked three-line plant and inserted it into the new business district model. I am showing you this image because it represents the limit of engineering. This is as far as the engineer could get in the problem. It is an incredible accomplishment. But to make this a compelling argument, we needed designers to create a vision for this idea. So we got to work making a building to hold this baby. On the left, you can see some of the sections where the WTE plant is in gray. And here are some of the basic floor plate types, from the WTE plant to the office floors to the roof garden on the right. This project represents our negotiation with the public. We all wish for waste to disappear, but unless we actually confront the dirty problem, we will never develop a sustainable relationship to waste. To think about it another way, we are landscape architects trying to design the waste out of the landscape fringe, trying to push it back into the architecture of the city core. If the waste we produce is dealt with at hand, if we see it as a gleaming edifice, and we hand our trash almost directly to the machine of the WTE, will we start to develop a healthier connection to our waste? Will our city become more natural by processing its own waste? I want to conclude my talk today by returning to Central Park. I want you to take a good look at its vast size. And now I want to fill it with trash. This is the estimated waste that the entire world produced in the year that Central Park was built. Look at these tiny buildings. This is the total global municipal waste after it's been compressed for 2024. Those were only single years. If we want to look at the waste produced since Central Park was constructed until today, it towers into the thermosphere. The problem of waste will not be solved in isolated efforts. It will not be solved by quixotic landscape architects, nor will it be solved by sanitation engineers alone. However, I hope this talk has encouraged you, the landscape architects of India and Asia, to consider the roots of our profession in solving humble and maybe dirty problems. And I sincerely hope that we can work together to develop noble solutions to these very worthy problems. Thank you all for listening, and I look forward to our discussion.
Good evening, all. I thank you for providing me this platform to share my thoughts and my work. My talk today is titled Not Just a Toilet and aims to throw light upon the landscape of sanitation in India. India is a home to many methods of worship, be it ritualistic, yogic, and spiritual approaches for connecting with oneself and with the supreme powers in the universe. While you are looking into the presence of ideas and narratives of sanitation in the context of ancient literature in India, we found narratives of Shaucha, which is a combination of practices about cleanliness of the body, mind, and spirit. The yogic practices of Shaucha dealt with themes such as general hygiene, isolating disease causing pathogens from human settlements, and strict prevention of water contamination by human waste, blood, or hazardous substances. Further, the readings in the Manusmriti reinforce the ideas of a strong separation between the living spaces and the spaces defined for cleansing. We then conducted a short study to understand the separations between the living and cleansing spaces in a small town near Bangalore, where we understood through conversation with the locals that the hinterland area was what was used for bathing and defecating in the past, as they are distant from the living spaces in the town. Over the years, with the expansion of the town boundaries, these hinterlands were engulfed by the growing town, leading to a lack of open land available to define for cleansing. This forced the community to include these public and common toilet spaces within the town in multiple locations. Although this is a study in sample area, the course of almost all cities in the country are about the same. This brought us to understanding and discussing the presence of these toilets within the city and their architecture. The images here are of some spaces defined as public toilets in different cities in India. An overview of this led us to further question and inquire into the architectural presence and vision for these spaces. It made us wonder if the architecture defined for these public toilets still continue to be an exclusion from the urban fabric, although it physically sits within the city. Through design, we tried to establish an inclusion of the toilet into urbanity in terms of its architecture and aesthetic. We also imagined proposals that were gender inclusive and easily accessible for all. A restroom is not just a polished word for toilet. The light box is a public restroom that is unique in terms of both form and function. Beyond the obvious toilet blocks, the restroom aims to provide women with an exclusive social space, something that is atypical of urban landscape in India.
The brief given by the NGO was pretty straightforward. They wanted a restroom for women and a WC for the handicapped. It actually helped us to take the word restroom quite literally and create a resting space. The public toilet is just 30% and the 70% of the space is just landscape where women can come, sit, maybe read a book, a newspaper. That triggered a new concept of what public toilets could be. The material palette is completely governed by how the climate works, and secondly, how we can ease the maintenance of the restroom. If you see, all the outer walls are made of stainless steel, which are easy to clean, and it's protecting the restroom from the outer side. 70% of the space is the landscape, so there we have just defined it with perforated metal, which allows a lot of natural light coming inside, a lot of ventilation happens. It's more like you're indoor but still you're in the outdoors. The whole idea of this tree, it takes you back to the vernacular setting in the villages. Trees are always looked up as the best resting places. People very casually go and sit under the tree and then they start chatting and then they spend hours. Earlier we had plans to plant trees and create a lot of lands. The tree was already there, so we thought why not build around it and then use the natural setting. The most sustainable architecture that we have resides in the villages, because there are no architects who go and design those buildings. It's just the users, they respond to the climate, they respond to their needs. So this whole prototype really responds to the city's needs.
This diagram here represents all the layers that went into making in this prototype. Due to the success of the prototype, the corporation decided to build 14 more such units within the city, each within a radius of 500 meters from one another. As a result of these conversations, we decided to make a family of restrooms with small, medium, large and extra large restrooms. Based on the space available in cities, we could modulate each of these prototypes. The restroom variant could take up many forms with the basic idea of a central garden that would comprise 70% of the total space. These variants could translate to any public facility that a city needs, like a bus stop, a Gram Panchayat office, or a post office. This resulted to another design for toilets, the light pavilion, with similar kit of parts like the light box. This prototype was designed for the local station platforms of Bombay, one unit on each platform of the suburban station. The proposal had a similar spatial narrative, like the light box, with perforated metal and metal structure. In India, community spaces often seem to be incidental. The stepwells and bowlies, for example, serve as spaces designed to fetch water, but the elaborate architecture itself provides for conversations among its visitors. Our learnings from these spaces were about visibility, porosity, and the potential of design to provide for community interaction while catering to a simple function like fetching water or even using a public restroom. The next project, Pause, is a building that sits as a marker along the Bombay-Goa highway, communicating visually to the passersby. With multiple access points and signages allowing the visitors to select their access points, with dedicated entry to male toilet that streamlines the circulation, making it easy for maintenance. The interiors are very porous with plants along the edge of the urinals. The openness allows the odor to escape and dries the toilets quickly. The entry to the female and differently able toilet is close to the front facade, so they don't have to navigate deep into the site. There is a similar planting detail along the edge of the basin and nursing station. The truck driver section has a Suvidha Kendra, tuck shop and a recreational space supported by toilets, washing and bathing spaces. The recreational space is semi-open with a charpai that makes the user comfortable to occupy this facility. The side elevation of this facility has a flamboyant facade where the form is responding to the function. The isometric here shows how all the activities interlock with one another in a manner that makes circulation easy for different user groups. This facility has a dedicated staff which looks after the building, which is a very important component for sanitation projects. Another idea that emerged out of this narrative is a community sanitation prototype, which we had proposed for the smaller districts of Calcutta. Along with toilets, these prototypes would offer separate spaces for male and female for bathing, washing and drying clothes. A reading room with a central garden along with dedicated open spaces for men and women with a tuck shop facing the street. The open space links all the activities together. In section, the roof gets detached from the walls to ensure good ventilation and lighting. The tuck shop forms the elevation towards the street, along with the steps and public spaces for men. After the public edge, one arrives into a garden surrounded by brick walls that has several access points. The edge of the garden has a library or a reading room, a recreational space for women, hidden access points to toilet blocks. All of these functions converge to the central garden. The central garden also holds the floating population during peak hours. The excerpt here is from an article called The Toilet, A Philosophy of Releasing by Jean Lee, where he talks about how architecture throughout history has been a rich expression of human lives, while the spaces for our releasing have been consistently dull, anonymous, and lack artistic expression. In this context, I would like to talk about the importance of addressing the user group in a sanitation project. Public toilet in a village, for example, which will be used by a community of farmers, would definitely be different architecturally from the one in a city. We explored these ideas of responding to specific user group to shape up the architecture and give the space a human-centric expression. We studied the truck drivers community as a user group and defined a proposal which would accommodate living and sanitation facilities for them. The video shows the context in which the truck drivers move constantly at a stretch of 22 hours with no pit stops and spaces to rest or rejuvenate. In 1982, for every 1,000 trucks, there were 1,300 drivers available. This number reduced to 750 by 2012 and is predicted to come down by 450 by 2025. The Truck Drivers Village in Chitradurga is a project that responds to the lifestyle and struggles of the truck drivers community.
गाड़ी लाइफ में कोई ठिकाना नहीं, ना आपको खाना मिल लेता है सही ढंग से, ना कहीं नहाने का टाइम मिलता है, लेकिन अपना कोई पेट पालने के लिए तो कुछ तो काम करना ही ना पड़े।
दिन में 500 किलोमीटर चलाना ही चलाना है, रात में 500 किलोमीटर चलाना है, सोते कहाँ हैं हम लोग। मैं रोड पे 15 दिन 20 दिन मैं चलता ही रहता हूँ। ट्रक ड्राइवर की ज़िंदगी बहुत बेकार है, वो रोड ही पे कट जाती है उसकी ज़िंदगी।
धूल मिट्टी से तो मतलब डेली नहाना है। पानी से नहाए या आदमी या ना नहाए, लेकिन धूल मिट्टी से डेली नहाना है। घर परिवार का याद हमेशा ही आता रहता है। या खाना खाने वक्त कभी टाइम मिलता है, सोने वक्त, मतलब याद तो आना ही है।
सबसे ज्यादा किसको मिस करते हो?
माँ को, सबसे ज्यादा माँ को।
हमको हमारे बच्चों की और मम्मी की याद ज़्यादा आती है।
बाहर जब हम निकलते हैं तो मेरा ये घर परिवार सब यही है। हमारा घर परिवार वहाँ भी है और यहाँ आने के बाद यहाँ भी है।
This is a process of how the building was conceived. The site is divided in three parts and the triangular spaces are used for parking. The middle space is used for fuel station and an amenity building. The amenity building is a triangular form which is further divided into smaller squares, each forming a house that offers different activities: to eat, to relax, to recreate. This forms a collection of homes, a village for the truck drivers. The plan is a complex geometry that comprises many courtyards that hold all the supporting facilities. The gardens inside the courtyards are designed with huge boulders and discrete vegetation to create a microclimate and to reference the landscape of Chitradurga, where the site is. The transient housing for truck drivers is an outcome of the facility we designed for Chitraduga. This project sits on a narrow plot measuring 50 feet by 500 feet in Rajasthan. At the front are common facilities for truck drivers and common people with a departmental store, grooming center, and a tea stall. All these facilities sit around a courtyard that connects with the main spaces. This court with a huge tree becomes a marker in space. The housing is laid in interlocking T-shaped units. Each unit is imagined as a T-shaped block with a common toilet. The other T unit then interlocks, and the units further expand with common interlocking wall. This whole system is laid out in a pattern that creates a fabric suitable for the climate of Rajasthan. The courtyard inside each T unit is used as a common living space by the truck drivers, where they can share their travel stories with each other. The rooms with bunk beds are used as spaces to rest. The center of the complex is a common space that is used by the drivers as a chowpan, where they can hang out during the day over a cup of tea or snacks. The remaining areas are designed as recreational spaces for carom and cards. The rooftops are open for recreation and to sleep at night under the sky, and other common pockets for leisure. I would like to end my talk by emphasizing that there is immense room for artistic exploration for designers in sanitation once one stops looking at its components only through the lens of function and standardized norms. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. It was a wonderful presentation. I'm sure it struck a chord with a lot of us here, especially the manner in which you happen to capture the emotional nuance and in your presentations, and the manner in which these restrooms were built around that idea. It was absolute delight to watch that. And thank you, Mr. Gas. Your ideas on waste management and the figures that you projected, the circular economy in terms of waste, and the figures that you projected were mind-boggling. So just to talk about this, India and China put together represent more than 35% of world's population today. We are both developing nations and have similar challenges pertaining to urban growth, consumption, urban sprawl, gentrification, and various approaches that our governments propose with respect to meeting affordable housing demands. Today, we tend to build with greed, with absolute disregard to the carrying capacity of land and buildability. We are growing at a rapid pace. Then there are issues around lack of resources, infrastructure, basic planning around public health and sanitation, and of course, waste management, which is often neglected almost as though it is no one's problem at all. It's not at all anyone's problem. So, Mr. Gas, the question, the question that you raised, it's absolutely pertinent as to why should a landscape architect deal with waste in the first place, and why is it our responsibility? As architects, urban designers, and planners, we are in constant search for improving our immediate and extended environment. Unfortunately, in the process, I presume we create more complex problems, and it's a vicious cycle. Development, as we all know, is a double-edged sword. We are all a part of this, and we are all guilty. Without taking any further time, I would now like to welcome our discussants for the day, Ms. Seema Redkar, Mr. Jacob Walker, Ms. Neha Sarwate, and Mr. Vinay Pushwa. We are also joined by Mr. Raniket Bhagwat and the presenters for the day, Mr. Daniel Gass and Rohan Chavan. I would like to first turn to Ms. Redkar. I would like to understand your thoughts on the presentations, and also as someone who bridges the gap between a designer, the community, and the municipal authorities, what are the challenges one typically faces in making things work, in both sensitizing the authorities as well as spreading awareness in public realm?
I think both the presentations were very interesting for me in specifically in relation to the city of Mumbai, where waste, you all know about the waste issues and the whole process of planning and designing of the waste and the dumping sites that we have in Mumbai. At the same time, I have worked with the World Bank project on slum sanitation and the engagement of community uh, in sanitation. The whole thing which I found is how do you see that the social fabric of the community is maintained in an economic way, and at the same time how do you see the environment balance is also sorted out. So this is something which is a big challenge I feel. uh, Second thing is, Daniel rightly said, guilt. The whole thing is, unless you feel the guilt, you won't think about it, or you can't be in the process, that you don't understand issues. So I like the concept of the halls and the museums that they have developed, and I think this is very important. We cannot have the whole education system in it, in the sense how do you send messages to the people without with within the design part, and I think that's very interesting. Of course, the designs have to be very local as much as possible, considering the environment around. For example, in slum, their challenges are water, their challenges the bills that come in toilets, their challenge is the space is less, they are overcrowded. In such cases, then we have to think of rainwater harvesting, recharging of groundwater. But how do you put it into design? I will definitely like to talk about one project in Mumbai where a community toilet is operation for last 24 years, sustaining completely on rainwater harvesting and ring wells, as well as saving almost 60% of power. And the terrace, or the open space of the toilet on the terrace, is used for multiple social activities like a creche, cooking, nutrition, food for children. There are dancing classes, there are study classes. Everything happens in a particular time frame. Like morning, the creche is open for women. Afternoon, the self-help group uses for grinding their wheat and material from the household. So I think the design has to be very much, it has to coexist with the local requirement. At the same time, how do you really see we are going to protect our environment, our surrounding, and the natural resources? At the same time, see that we learn through a lot of original traditional methods that India has in designing, which is missing many a times. And I think that's very, like, there are wells which we didn't know there are wells in the slums. We know the slums, but they were either covered or they were half shabby. So we clean 6 wells in that particular slum, and we are getting water from there. So I think these are and which should be a part of the design, and which should, and it's very important to maintain the social fiber of the community which is there. Engagement can only happen if people are involved. And secondly, I think any space which is not used get abused. So, so how these sites in the heart of the city or in the slums, if they are used or moved, there is a movement around it, then they cannot be abused. So the biggest learning is, yes, the spaces which are so called dirty and filthy need to be used in the form of training, in the form of community lead, and what he said is exhibitions. That makes people continuously monitor the thing directly or indirectly. So these are my inputs right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rekar. Mr. Walker, I turn to you now. Uh, your thoughts on the presentations, and as well, I'm a little curious. Do you have similarities of issues in India and China? Do you face the similar sort of challenges? And also, I would like to understand your thoughts on especially the second and third projects that Mr. Gas was talking about. About he spoke about people and their involvement, and they didn't let a plant happen, and then you had to shift that idea. You came with this new idea about putting the plant right bang in the center of the city. So your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the talks are really great, and they're yeah, very interesting topics of waste. And I think that one of the things that I've been thinking about in relationship to these talks is very much about the kind of cultural dimension of waste, which is to say that it's essentially the same question in a way that you're asking me. It's also a question I have about what are the different ways that we view waste and across different cultures, and are there types of waste that we can't see because of our own cultural lens? And I'm interested in that kind of comparison, between India and China and, even the United States, in terms of like what types of waste do we not necessarily see? Like Dan starts his talk kind of talking about the amount of plastic waste that is done as part of delivery for food in China, which is like extremely intense amount of plastic waste that is created, more so than any I've seen anywhere else, specifically like for food deliveries. And is there a relationship to the ideas, culturally rooted ideas of food and that relationship to waste? Like what are those? And unpacking that is, I think, like a really interesting topic. And then I think that in terms of, that's one kind of question that I have, and discussion that, I hope we kind of get into and start to unpack a little bit. And I think that some of the other things that were kind of interesting more on I would say theoretical or almost like philosophical, approach to the ideas that were being discussed was a lot about the relationship of revealing and hiding things. Utilizing design to reveal something. For example, bringing awareness to waste management or to the burning of trash to bring electricity and like bringing visibility to that. And same with toilets and rest stops, utilizing design as something to bring visibility to. But then at the same time, there is also a kind of hiding that is occurring as well, because in a toilet, it's very much about privacy at times, and then the hiding of the human body or the hiding of release. And in the same way, the waste to energy plant is also, in a way, the idea of camouflage and kind of hiding this function within a different kind of structure, or a structure that appears to be something else, is also there. So there's this kind of like, I would say, contrast or complexity in the discussion, particularly as it in terms of design, is about, both wanting to show everything, but then also understanding that part of the complexity is that it's also about hiding something as well. And so that's a kind of interesting, balance that needs to be played, that I would also be interested to hear, thoughts on that relationship of like hiding and showing, revealing, and taking away in a sense. And yeah, I think that those are some of my like kind of just general thoughts about the talks. Yeah, and I guess to kind of get and in terms of a question, one of the things I sort of question, and I have to get over my own thoughts on this, because I come across it particularly with the WTE plants as well, and this will kind of lead to your question about you know why or how we approached this idea of like placing it in the city, which is like, what are the limitations of design? And then how are those limitations dealt with in the process? So I'm thinking about the where does design end and then maintenance begin, or ideas of cleanliness come in, and the same thing with the waste to energy power plant.
I think there's a lot of good points that have been raised by Miss Seema Redcar and by Jake as well. To get to Jake's question, because I think it strikes at the heart of, you know, designers talking about design, and then the sort of that looming question of, well, does it matter? And you know, I've really, you know, as a personal journey with waste and the way that our studio has been dealing with it, I think you kind of, you know, these are big problems. These are looming issues that are not easily solvable. So you kind of go through waves of energy at solving them and like getting inspired again. And I think as I kind of step back from the process and I'm thinking about that, I think it's a bit like you're saying, it's that everything has a role in this process, right? You have to have, you know, what Ms. Redcar is saying, the way that the city is staffing this and operating it is facilitating people using that as a public plaza, or you know, it becomes a public space because of the sort of the pride of operating it and the you know, ability to maintain that. And I think what the functions of what our projects have shown, both Rohan's and BAM's, is that the design does generate enough interest and intensity about these things that it's calling, I think it's sort of upsetting some of the norms that are in place. And I think once you start that process, you know, once design kind of opens the door, then it empowers people in the city that have these jobs to do bigger moves, you know, to get more money. And I think they all have to work together. It's very, very cooperative. But I think that what's so cool about, especially what Rohan was showing with the truck drivers especially, is that, you know, as the things that we do in design school and the things that we learn to project issues and see problems and then start to kind of build narratives and solutions to them, that kind of thinking is what needs to kind of lead the team, right? You need to, so it's, as I think about it, our role is really, how do we pull the team together? Probably our solutions aren't perfect, right? From either like economic or even environmental methods. They're probably not perfect, but their attempts and the energy of that is hopefully inspiring, and it allows these other things to sort of, you know, coalesce. And I think that's the sort of that's the general kind of thing that design can do. And I think you've also raised that sort of upper level, which is sort of more what does it mean culturally and all of those things that I'll let you guys discuss a little bit further. But that's my general feeling about the role of design and these issues so far.
Rohan, do you want to take that about both the things, about the cultural, association we have with respect to sanitation, and what a lot of people don't accept it, and you do know the condition.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in India, we at least have that stigma about these toilet buildings. Like I mean, they're always looked up as, you know, bad buildings. So, and what Jake was mentioning, that no one wants a building near their place. And we had that first-hand experience. I mean, we went through NGOs and other agencies of selecting these sites and placing the toilets. And they were constantly being opposed, you know, like no one wanted a toilet next to their house or if it's coming in front of their property. So, and that is one of the reasons why we have to come up with these kind of prototypes, which are very like flamboyant and like very attractive, and you know, and I think even in Daniel's project we saw that the outcome of the project was I mean, something else. I mean, and the buildings were very, very attractive. I mean, it's like feeding a toddler. No, they don't like the food that you give them, and you have to make the food good and try and feed them. So it's that kind of a process. So yeah, I totally agree with all these conversations that are going around.
I think both the projects are, both the presentations are very thought-provoking. They've discussed topics which are not so desirable to discuss in the public forum. and the whole act of NIMBYism comes into play. Not in my backyard, and these are very fundamental to our existence. We live in a society that has been intoxicated or drugged, by this whole idea of consumerism and creating a lot of waste. And now we are forced into rehab. I take that as an analogy right now for the way our society has come up. And we're struggling with this whole waste problem in all cities and even villages. Even in rural areas, this whole issue of waste management is a big thing, and a lot of our water entities and natural systems have been clogged and abused. On the other hand, the issue of toilets that leads to a lot of sanitation kind of discussions and debates, very sensitive to the different sections of society. At least in India, most of the public toilets are the primary means of natural excretion use for a huge section of society. So, like even if you call it slum dwellers or the underprivileged section of society, for them this is the primary sanitation facility. And so if the design can focus on that, I mean, Rohan's design, some of them have addressed that issue, and they can facilitate as these kind of activities. So more than recreational, it is more functional in nature also. And in India, we have a lot of issues on maintenance and operation, light and ventilation being one big thing, but accessibility of water, be it for flushing or be it for cleaning and maintenance. That water is a big issue. Where do you bring that water from? And who's going to supply it? And where is the sewage going to go? Is it going to go in the drains, in the municipal drains, or in open drainage systems? So these are few things that one needs to factor in. Just another thing is to address the truck drivers kind of rest areas. We also have in the urban areas a huge growing population of these delivery people. We have domestic help, all these people who have who are in this transition mode. They don't go to work in offices, they don't have a 9 to 7 job kind of a thing.
Correct.
So you have Zomato, Swiggy, delivery boys, you have domestic help looking, they have to while away the time between 2 and 4 work. You have a lot of this transient population, if I can call it so. So a lot of these facilities can provide some kind of repose for this kind of population. So these facilities should be looked beyond just public toilets, I feel.
Correct.
And the solid to waste also, there are a lot of other issues. Like I have questions like what happens. Yes, the heat generated through incineration could be used for energy, to creating energy. But what about the pollution, the microplastics that are emitted? What about the heat that is the urban heat island, if there is any, and how is that mitigated? So what happens to the truck traffic on the streets? When you bring that kind of volume into city streets, into downtown streets, how does one manage all of that? So I have all these kind of planning related questions, and then that makes me question whether this is it an ideal situation. Yeah, that's from my side.
Rohan, you want to take that or come back to it?
Yeah, we can come back to it.
Okay.
Also, I mean, let me sort of interject. So first of all, I think both Daniel, Rohan, I mean, Rohan's work, of course, one is familiar with. And it was an absolute pleasure to see the kind of work that Daniel is doing. And, I am very intrigued by, so at some level, I sort of understand that this whole problem of waste, or whether it's toilets, is something that needs to be handled pretty much as Daniel says, at many, many, many levels. And many actors will need to do their bit before we find some headwinds in solving it. But just to play the devil's advocate, and, I look at what Daniel has done, I look at what Rohan has done, I know the project that Big has done, which is again a waste to energy project. And I wonder whether we are sort of, making this pretty, whether we are making this seem pretty and acceptable. So waste that was something that you looked at with revulsion or with the sense of being repulsed by it, now suddenly becomes a neighborhood park, a community center. And so what do you really do with it? Do you then sort of sanitize it to such an extent that we start not thinking of it as a problem, or do we continue to think of it as a problem? So I'm kind of interested in knowing what Daniel and also Rohan want to say about the psychological manner in which, and it's slightly devil's advocate, but the psychological manner in which you think people will react, will by doing this. Are you saying, or do you think the messaging is, it's okay? I mean, there's a waste plant, but it's my neighborhood park. So what's the big deal? Or it's okay, it's a museum. So what's the big deal? So what do you have to say about that?
No, I mean, at a certain level, at least in my experience, we're trying to instill a certain level of dignity within these buildings, because the kind of buildings that we saw in Bombay when we were doing these projects were in a very bad shape, and they had no character. There's the lack of functional aspect, then lack of light and ventilation. So just to try and create an identity, or maybe the paused restrooms we were trying to create like a certain level of a brand that could travel across and maybe create maybe create like a comfortable facility for women, men, or even the truck drivers. So that was the whole intent. I mean, looking at the existing infrastructure, what it is trying to do, what shape it is in, and the way people are looking at it, that entire study helped us to understand how the visual language can become an important aspect in resolving these conditions. Obviously, the functional aspect was one of it. Obviously, the light, ventilation, and the way things function is important. But the visual identity also became a guiding factor to kind of resolve these issues.
Sure, Rohan. Mr. Daniel, you want to take that too, as to, should one romanticize the waste or not make it seem like waste? I did see that, you covered your entire waste treatment plant in a garden, right? So you made it seem like a park, and you also looked at the idea of educating people about the waste. But that's one thing. So do you think you should look at waste as waste the way it is, or do you have to sort of cover it up and make it look nicer for it to be accepted?
Yeah, I think these are great questions. The question of this devil's advocate question: are we just making it pretty? Yeah, but I think it goes back to saying we're actually starting to look at it. I think we kind of let it disappear, and I'm speaking specifically about solid waste here, but I think it disappears in our mind. And I think that it's very, very opaque where it goes. Like how much do you know about where your trash goes? And I think that sort of disconnection is partially a design problem. I do, because I think, as a society, reached a level of industrial and production and consumption that we're no longer, we don't even have a relationship to the waste that we're producing. And it's not just not in my backyard. It's whoever has cash, whoever has money, whoever has wealth, pushes it downstream, not just out of their backyard to other countries or to the ocean. It's just as far away as you can send it. So, and I think that there's a lot of opacity around the world in waste management. And it's very great to hear about Avalon Clean Energy. because there are new companies that are starting to focus on this as a problem that's not something that's just swept under the rug. We don't know if it's producing heavy metals. We don't have these horrible places of labor where there was injuries and it was this amalgamation of like new technology essentially being expended on a population. And then the role that architecture starts to form through Bauhaus and through modernism to start to rethink of the factory as a space. So I think, a lot of the issues that Rohan's bringing up about, architectural solving these issues, I think we need to do that with waste. It's our time to do that right now with waste, because all the things that we know about putting it in landfills and all that stuff, and the budding WTE, the waste to energy stuff, it all needs to have a new design approach. And it's up to designers to, make the new factory for waste and make it something that people, actually start to look at and think about. And the only way that we get people to do that is to make it something that's, it doesn't have to be pretty, but it has to be something that's intriguing enough that it pulls people in and they start to think about where waste goes, what happens to it. Otherwise, we're lost.
Right. That's an interesting thought, and also something that I was thinking about when you said, the waste is actually not in your backyard, but I was looking at a different picture that the kind of the rate at which we are growing, the sprawl literally is spreading between engulfing all the peripheral sort of rural settlements and things like that. So all the landfill areas and all the waste lands that are also generated due to construction activity, let us say there are quarries, there are other sort of lands around. Now, do you think, how do you think one can look at this sort of waste, right? The debris, the construction debris or the quarry lands. I would like Vinay, if you would want to take this up. What do you think a role of a landscape architect or a planner could be in this sort of a situation, in a scenario where your backyard is actually a quarry or your backyard is actually a landfill? We are confronted with these situations.
Well, thank you, Aparna. First of all, I think again would like to repeat that the presentation by Daniel and Rohan was fantastic. I think was happy to see that in spite of all these, dark humor kind of or the plight of this, looking at the idea of waste or the idea of lack of toilets and all, and how the idea of art and design has really, come into play and, created an interesting, projects out of it. And that's something incredible and heartwarming to see. I think answering to your question, when as a landscape designer, we are given a situation where, whether it's a land that has been quarried or there's a lot of debris which has been, is a result of whether it's a demolition or something. I think quarry is something which, as in studio, we all know how the project Timber has demonstrated as to, just by using, simple measures, just work with the idea of ecology, working with soil, the right kind of, forest establishment measures and patience, you can really get back or you can really restore the idea of nature back. And that I think is not easy. Otherwise, we could have seen a lot of, these kind of projects shaping up in the country or abroad. I think talking about the debris, I mean, there are ways and means of dealing with it. The one of the easiest ways really to do like a soil cover above it, and then work with the different soil depths and all, and then create some more like a recreational spaces. But there's not much examples that I can talk about, but I think it's not a difficult thing to. It is a difficult thing to deal with.
Yes, and I think at the back of your mind, you're thinking it's simple because as landscape architects, we are always doing problem solving, and I think that's coming from there. Ms. Neha, do you or Jake, do you have any more questions? Neha, I actually wanted to ask you, as planners, as an environmental planner, how do you, work with these situations? You do know the city is going to grow, and you do know the city is going to ruin the water systems, and it is going to create these landfills. How equipped are we as planners or planning departments of the country to deal with this rapid pace at which our cities are growing?
Yeah, it's a good question because right now, the city where I am from, Vadodara, we're struggling with waste management and CNG waste, construction demolition waste, and in Baroda, a lot of our ravines and riparian corridors have been damaged by the dumping of CND waste because we don't have a CND plant over here that crushes and reuses that kind of soil, or create reusing the materials. The entire governance system in India is pretty much jeopardized right now. Right from the society, the users, we take things for granted and we turn a blind eye, and it's none of we have this attitude of not my problem, it's the government's problem, the government has its own reasons, so everybody tries to throw the ball in each other's courts, and it's the nature and environment and the cities that suffer. I think it's the quality of life that suffers the most, because there is lack of ownership, or of all these problems by the people in the city. We have a huge problem of migration also, so that sense of belongingness is not there. It's a very important aspect, where cities are concerned, because then everybody is, in this mode of use, throw, and somebody else will come and clean it up, and that's not my problem. That kind of a mindset has come in. But yes, in Baroda, we are in the process, working with the local authorities to remove a lot of CND waste from the ravines and the active floodplains. And there are plans to divert that kind of waste into projects that require a lot of dead material or inert material as filling materials, be it highways or the ramps for highways and bridges, or for in the real estate industry where you need that kind of filler material.
Definitely.
And there are a lot of companies also, a lot of small industries that are trying to create building material from these from the debris, so that there is less demand on soil and natural resources. So that's in progress, but it's a long way to go.
Yes, that sense of belonging is something very interesting that you spoke about. The other issue that we always face is about awareness. And I would like to take this to Jake. Jake, you also practice in USA. So what do you see? I mean, how different is it in the America as against, a developing nation? What is your relationship to the waste that the country generates, or how is it managed? Is that a problem? Because I do know that USA is like one of the largest producers of waste. So how is it managed, and what is the relationship to waste that is generated? Is there awareness, adequate awareness?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a kind of different. It's yeah, I mean, every situation is a little bit different, and I think that a lot of this gets back to the question, the devil's advocate question, and also a little bit of Dan's response as well. I mean, I think that I think there's a lot to the idea of bringing visibility to things that we've become so like quite good at hiding. So for example, like, and we can look at a lot of processes, industrial processes, and say almost the same thing, because the way that a contemporary, a contemporary upper class, middle upper class life is one in which you order something online, it comes to you in a beautiful box that you unwrap, and you show people online how it came wrapped, and you unbox it, and then you throw that away. You go to the bathroom, you flush it, it disappears. none of these processes are revealed to us. I mean, especially like in a place like America, you go to the supermarket and you get a piece of chicken that's so perfectly cut and completely unrelated to a chicken whatsoever. You just get some perfect breast meat, you know, on a plate, basically, you know. And so all of these processes are completely like devoid of their origins, and we consume them and remove them from our daily life without these perceptions. And I think that gaining those perceptions is super important and one of the key things that design can do. And I think, as Dan was talking about a little bit, like, and Rohan was saying this as well, it's like, you know, you have to make the food a little bit sweeter so a baby will eat it, even if it's, you know, like whatever, broccoli or something like that. Or the role of design in a way is like to open the door, right? It's not necessarily that design can solve every problem, but you can open the door for other people to say, oh, this is something we need to go through this door, we need to solve this problem. And so I think that if you start to think about that in not, you could expand it beyond just waste. You know, where do batteries come from? Where does lithium come from? What does that do to the environment and the urban conditions that those places are, and all of those things? Like, where do chickens come from? How do we have a better relationship to that breast meat that gets, you know, from the grocery store? And I think that, for example, like the discussion of waste to energy, because this is something that we are more familiar with in a way. Waste to energy power plants, like, there's a very different approach to it between like United States and Europe and China. I think China and Europe have a much more you know, progressive understanding of how to do or deal with that type of waste. In America, it's shocking because everything is still buried or sent to another country. I mean, everything is in landfills here, and they try to divide things up, and there is some sort of like cognition or understanding that yes, you have to divide your thing, or yes, you have to
segregate,
you know, compost. But I question like in terms of the overall like infrastructure, yeah, like that it's still problematic. Like, even if people think they're doing the right thing, it still just disappears for them, right? You know, I mean, and it gets sent to the Philippines or something like that. So bringing these issues to the foreground and saying and telling people they have to do, you know, like recognize them and deal with them, I think is a fundamental component of design.
Thank you for that. That was good. Mrs. Redkar, you're raising your hand, so I call you.
I just wanted to add to something. That's basically that in a country like India, where space is one more constraint, and the whole challenge is, should we do centralized waste processing or you should have decentralized waste processing? And livelihood related to that, which is also a part of planning and designing. How do you set up these dry waste centers? We are just talking waste to energy or other waste processing. But in a city like Mumbai, we have more than 40 centers, but none of them have proper design or anything coming up on that. So can we work on, because it is directly connected with the rack in Mumbai, okay? And that doesn't go to that goes to recycling. And this is all machine or man-made waste. It's not natural. It's not environmental friendly waste. So I think this is what also needs to be included in the part of design. And that's very, very important. For example, the Devnar and the Kanjur one, which we see in the city of Mumbai, which is affecting thousands of people in Vikhroli and Eswat. I mean, that's the area where the odor and smell, and that's why people do not want to have the whole. Why does it come up? Why a sanitation project is good? Why Rohan's highway project is good? Unless you set up models, it doesn't work. It takes time. The project which I worked, which I shared the information. Now government is coming up, the BMC is coming up on a policy that they would include rainwater harvesting, solar, community engagement more strongly. And on highways, they want to do a different model. And I think this is what, unless you showcase, unless that faith building has to happen. and it's a process which takes time. So, and I think Rohan's both the models I felt they were very interesting, especially the truck drivers. It is one sector of the society which is not even thought about. Women, we talk about women, but they are almost transporting 50% of the goods in India, all over India, and that sector was never catered. So I think we have to look at issues, the rag pickers in the city, all the sun, taking Pune, taking Mumbai. Thousands of people are dependent on the waste that is generated, the dry waste that they are taking or recovering the waste or recycling, upscaling. So I think different designs and these can come from students. I think even innovative things from students come up very well. I think I have students placed with me from Raheja and all that. They come up with fantastic ideas. Not necessarily all are implementable, or even if they are implementable, they may not be taken up by the government. But at one stage, government accepts it, and then it becomes it is one plus point in the policy to modify the policy. And I think that's the reason we have to try and experiment, and we have to go through the process.
One of our attendees is also talking about smell, and it's the thing that you don't see and the thing that lingers about. And that is a major problem when you're talking about landfills and when you're talking about the waste treatment plants. So Mr. Gas, Rohan, Jake, anyone who wants to, or who wants to address that, how do you deal with smell?
So, but before that, first I would like to understand how are these dumping grounds decided? I mean, is there a certain norm or?
There are norms.
Yeah, but why can't the norms be that within the certain radius of a dumping yard, you cannot have a residential facility? And maybe like how industrial towns are set up. I mean, I'm just throwing a possibility. I mean, today we have these dumping grounds right in the middle of the city of Bombay. We have a very good example of Devnar, which creates a lot of smoke, and it's very hazardous to people who are staying around that area. So, I mean, one way to rethink that or relook at that is if the government can set up certain standards or norms of how these dumping grounds can be set up. That was one way of looking at it.
So, Rohan, I'm just reminded of the city, Mandya. Mandya in Karnataka, right?
Yeah.
So you know what happened a few years ago. That literally 150 trucks per day were going all the way from Bangalore to Mandya town and dumping there. So the entire city was filled with stench. Like residents were unable to tolerate it anymore. And then one fine day, they just protested. They said no trucks from outside of Mandya can, this town can come here and dump their waste.
Correct.
And it so happened that the waste garbage collection within our city, a city of Bangalore, halted, just stopped for a whole week. And we realized, at that point, we saw the waste and it was in our house, right?
Correct.
We could not dump it anywhere. At that point, there was this moment of realization, and then people started sorting their waste.
Correct.
And then government had to find an alternate dumping yard. But that was a knee-jerk reaction. They just found another dumping yard, but they didn't plan. It's been few years and there's no action at all. It's just absolute apathy.
Yeah.
So that's how it is. So stench and smell is something that's invisible. I think it is still waste lingering about.
Yeah.
So Daniel, how do you address that? Did you think of addressing that in your project, or how do you control waste smell?
Great. Yeah, it's a good question. Trash is stinky generally. There's a lot of study though. I mean, I think, there is technology here, right? About how you control airflow. I think with our WTEs, especially, there was a lot of study through this, I believe it's called AirMod software, where you're looking at the analysis of the plume of the incinerated material, and then also the digestion, because a lot of the liquid that comes from the trash is digested anaerobically, and that's quite stinky. That's the stinky part. But there's also some science to this. I mean, you within a pure WTE, for example, with the one that we're looking at for the like theoretical skyscraper to address that came from the audience. There's ways to structure this, with air pressure and tunnels for the trucks, which are required for all WTEs in China. There's kind of this like long chute where the trucks back up, and once you're inside of it, you're in this sort of air pressure situation where the truck smell is all getting pulled through the filtration of the WTE itself. So it's still stinky, right? Like if you go through the inside of it, it's still stinky. But I think that as a problem, we could figure out ways to put these in locations that are not requiring us to take it out to the land of people that are less fortunate to dump it, but actually starting to treat it more at the source. And I think it's possible, and I think it's one of these things where once you start the design problem and you really start working on it, there's parts that you still have to keep figuring out. But I'm quite confident that, working together with engineers and city planners, you could trucks below the central business district, and they don't have to drive across the city to block. I mean, the trucks are there anyway, right? To return to Ms. Neha's question, all the trucks are there anyway. They're driving the trash out at 3 a.m. So you still have all of that track. It's just now you're removing the need for it potentially. And I think it also opens up the possibility of other waste collection systems and things like that. So stink is an issue, but it's one that, I think you deal with as part of the design problem potentially.
No, I mean, just one thing coming to my mind. I mean, all the toilets that we did, we use these biodigesters so that the smell doesn't come out. So all the waste gets decomposed on the side, and the bacteria kind of digest everything, and the output is wastewater. So, I mean, I just wanted to know from Daniel, like, is there a system or a method that can be applied at a larger scale where, the smell doesn't come out of this whole system? Like, let's say in incinerators, it all gets decomposed, but I think the output is a certain amount of smell that comes out of it. But is there any technology, like, let's say if we scale up the biodigester, could it perform in a similar way in helping that decompose in a different manner? Or is there something available that...
We come back to Daniel. Vinay, you were raising your hand, so I thought you would say something.
So I think because I got a little worried listening to all the concerns and the mammoth scale that we all as a city and countries are dealing with. But I thought, let me just soften it and all. So like after seeing Daniel's presentation and then relating it to Rohan's presentation, there's a small incident that I like to just narrate and share it with you. So because we do a lot of public park as a CSR with Torrent and the corporation of the town, there was a small incident that I like to share. So, there was already a public park existing and we were upgrading and really, redoing it completely mostly. And earlier there used to be a public toilet within the campus, which was somehow, I mean, it should not be part of the park, but it was. And just the way it was functioning and it was maintained, there was always a continuous stench around it. So, it was more like a nuisance because, it was really not kept and all. So when we took up the park to redesign it, we said that that toilet has to be dismantled and we will do a public toilet within the garden, within the park. The moment we said, okay, we will do a public toilet within the park, just across because it was on the edge of the park, there was a society across. And those society people, the moment they got to know that we are doing a toilet in just opposite the lane inside the park, they all came and really protested that you can't do it, you can't do it. There are ladies and there is this, and there'll be a lot of nuisance, there'll be stench and all that. Now, just as a little humor to it, Mr. Bhagwat was here for that meeting, and he said, if you don't want your apprehension, your protest is for a built structure or it is for the toilet. And they said it's a toilet. And the toilet was meant to be like a ground structure, nothing more than that. And then, still they could have allowed a better view of the park beyond. So he said, okay, fair, I won't do a toilet, that's agree. But can I do anything else as a structure? He said, yeah, that you can do. So the toilet got shifted somewhere else, and he designed like a 2-story blank wall with a gym. And when they saw the toilet, obviously the toilet is beautiful, it's maintained well, it's not nuisance. But then in return, they are now living with a blank 2-story wall which has a gym. So I think it's humorous, and we also laugh about it. But I think it's about the stigma, and it's coming from the past. People still believe toilets can never be clean. So when you see Rohan's kind of a structure, I'm sure people will say, okay, do a toilet next door and not really far off. So that's it. I think nothing else.
No, but yeah, Vinay, what you're saying, the maintenance part is very, very important in that. That's what we have also experienced. Even if we design like a very good building, so that's where we showed in the past project. So there were like 5 dedicated people who were taking care of that toilet day and night, and that's why the toilet is still, the same, the way we had conceived it on, like day one. But the other toilets are not in a great condition. Right. So I think the maintenance and plays a very, very important role in these kind of projects. Yeah,
absolutely.
And this is an urban situation we are talking about. In rural parts of India, even though there's a whopping number of, let's say, 95 crore toilets which were built, and rural people do not use the toilet because they have the stigma that the toilet cannot be close by to their home, and there are open drains, so their waste is actually being conveyed in open drains. So they lock their toilets up and go outdoors. So that's the situation here. Anyone? Jake, would you like to share any comments, final comments?
No, I mean, I don't have anything particular. I think it's all. I think that story about giving the people a blank wall was quite funny, and yeah, I mean, I think that it's a process that is going to take time, but it's also like exposing people to more and more of these issues, and addressing them and making them design problems. I think is important.
Thank you. Anyone?
Yeah, I'd like to just add one thing to Rohan's question.
Yeah.
See, basically, this most of the toilets in Mumbai, since I work in the toilet, the issue is with the urinals. Because I have done head count of each toilet for almost 1 month. And the fact was, out of 6,800 people, 4,000 were urinal users. And the stink is majority of the time it's from the urinal users. So what we did is we couldn't change the entire design. So we put the trap of hand wash of both the toilet, male and the female, section to the trap of the urinal. As a result, every hand wash, the urinal, that trap, there is no order till today. There are 3,000 people served. There is no order for last 22 years.
That's a very interesting.
We didn't know that there was something innovative, but I think this has worked. There is a stink. I'm not saying that, but the stink is not as bad as that, and it continuously go on scrolling in the toilet, in the urinal part. Me murkha nahi hai. Me toilet se vapar changla karna. For weight, there are a lot of garment industries. So I am going to bring we used to put an ad today. Chindi recyclers will be coming at this time. So it became a place where we used it for awareness. And this is working very well till today. If you go, it's continuously in the queue, but you don't have the order because 80% people, initially only 40% people used to hand wash. We found 36 to 40. And majority of them were women and children, but not the men. So then we put, हम लोग गधे हैं, इतने औरत लोग हाथ धोते हैं, इतने. And after 1 month we raised that to 82%. So basically we wanted that trap to be clean. And we didn't know this Dr. Mashalkar happened to see that. He said, oh, this is something very, we didn't know what innovation we did. We just thought there is no smell, we didn't know what. But now they have come to a conclusion that it is because of the water continuously flowing. The number of people using and the stink is very limited. So I think the urinal is one thing we really need to design or think about. How do we do it in a better way for the urinals. Toilets, yes, like go to Govandi, they are overused, so you will have stink there. But majority of the toilet, the urinal is a big challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to translate, it says women and children wash their hands, and people who don't wash their hands are donkeys. It's something to that effect. So men ended up washing their hands. So Neha, do you want to add anything?
I just wanted to answer Rohan's question as to what is there another alternative treatment. So in Vadodara, in a rural area, we've just installed an alternative STP.
I see. Okay.
Which we've taken raw sewage. We, in the sense, we have a team over here. We've taken raw sewage, and it does not smell. And it's out in the open next to residents. And there was a little, hue and cry over it. But after after the whole system is functional, it's a very small scale system.
Okay.
I think the villagers are taking pride in it.
Oh, I see. Nice.
I can share you the link of that, and then you can.
Yeah. I think you shared some link in the chat. Is that the same one?
Yeah.
Okay, I see. I'll have a look at it.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. It was a wonderful session, and we learned a lot. And I think we'll be far more responsible towards the waste we generate. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Rohan. Your presentation
was
absolutely wonderful. We thoroughly enjoyed the presentations as well as the session after. And thank you, all discussants. We will be joining next Saturday. Again, we could meet the next Saturday, and we do have Pedro Pedalino from Vietnam, and we have Karina Kochari from Mumbai, talking about environment and community, and we'd love to have you all join us.
Sure.
Thank you.